What's going on, guys, and welcome to another Doctor Who classic review. Today we're going to be reviewing the third Doctor Jon Pertwee story, The Daemons. So this is the final story from Season 8, and it is the last story of Season 8 that I had to watch as well. So, yeah, I was looking forward to this one. I've heard kind of mixed things. I've heard some people say that they really enjoy this one, and then other people say that it's not the best in the world, it's not terrible, but, you know, I've never heard awful things about this story, but it's not one that I see a whole lot of praise for. It's just kind of one of those, from what I've heard, run-of-the-mill stories, and to be honest, I'll let you know right now, that's kind of how I felt about it after watching it. It is decent, but it's nothing special in my opinion. It's probably one of the weaker ones in Season 8. It's kind of there with Terror of the Autons for me, and kind of Claws of Axos, but yeah, it's definitely not one of the better ones in this season, but it is a perfectly fine story. So anyway, let's have a look at the back of the DVD cover. This is The Daemons by Guy Leopold. In the peaceful village of Devil's End, something very strange is happening. A professor is preparing to open a nearby burial mound, and a local white witch foresees death and disaster. Meanwhile, the new vicar looks suspiciously like the master, and he is using black magic to conjure up an ancient demon. Can the Doctor, Jo and Unit stop their old enemy before he succeeds? So that is one thing to talk about here. Is it the Daemons? Is it the Demons? Now, I mean, in the story, at least on a couple of occasions, they say Daemons. So I am going to call it the Daemons. The way it's written, it's like a D, and then it's like an A and E like molded together into one letter. Some people call it the Demons. I'm going to call it the Daemons, just because they say that in the story, and it is an A and an E together. It's not how you would usually spell demons. So the Daemons is what I'm going for. Yep, of course, being Season 8, it's another Master story. This was the Master season. Is it 5 or 6 stories in this season? I think 5? However many it was, all the stories had the Master in it. So, you know, by this last episode, you're kind of expecting the Master to rock up, and sure enough, he does. And I mean, he's not even in a disguise this time. He literally just looks like the Master, but he's, you know, pretending to be the vicar of this church. Ends up being like this demonic cult that he's kind of a leader of. So that's interesting, an interesting portrayal for the Master there, but, you know, kind of what you'd expect from the Master, you know, that sort of cult leader kind of fills that role pretty well. So yeah, let's get started with the cast. Alright, so of course, starting us off with Jon Pertwee as the third Doctor. Yeah, he is really, really good in this one. Nothing bad to say about Jon Pertwee, really ever, to be honest. He works really well with Jo, with Katie Manning, of course. Great moments with the Master as well. I don't think there's a whole lot with the Doctor and the Master in this one. They only really, from what I remember, they only actually see each other right at the end of the story. So it's a 5-parter, by the way, so a bit of a different length there, you know, not 4 parts, not 6 parts that you would usually expect, a 5-parter, so somewhere in between. But yeah, Jon Pertwee, really, really good. Katie Manning as Jo Grant, of course, always very good as well. I do quite like Jo Grant. She's a very good companion, and this is, of course, her first season, so yep, quite like her in this one. Also, Roger Delgado as the Master, very good as well. I think if you're watching these in order, by this point you're maybe a bit sick of the Master, because, you know, it doesn't feel necessary in a lot of stories. I think in this one he does have a good role here. You know, that whole, like I just said before, that whole kind of cult leader thing works very well for the Master, and especially Roger Delgado's Master. It just has that, I don't know, that feel about it. So I definitely do think he belongs in this one, definitely more than he has in some other stories in this season, and, you know, stories later on in the run. But yeah, altogether the main cast, I mean, you've also got Nicholas Courtney as the Brigadier. You've got, I can't remember who all the actors are who play, you know, Benton, Mike Yates, you know, all those unit characters. They're all very good as well. Benton and Yates actually do quite a bit in this story, have a bit to do. So, yep, good to see them all. Everybody, the whole cast is very good. I'm thinking of the guest cast. Guest cast pretty good as well. You've got the woman that plays the witch. She's very posh sounding and a bit weird, but she's a witch. I think it works fine. And then you've got like the reporter guy that you see kind of at the start. He's pretty good, very 70s reporter sort of feel about it, but it is of the time. But yeah, pretty much everybody in this one is very good. Alright, so let's get on to some points about the Daemons. First of all, the Master fails to hypnotize the witch. So yeah, he tries hypnotizing the witch at the start to kind of, make her believe in him and, listen to him. It's the thing the Master does a lot, hypnotizing people. But she cannot be hypnotized. She's a witch, and I guess, yeah, it just doesn't work for her. So she doesn't know that he's the Master at this point. She just knows he's the vicar and he's a bit weird, but she's trying to play along with it. But yeah, the Master fails to hypnotize her. I think that's an interesting character trait for the witch thing happening. The Doctor arguing with people at the pub. I loved that scene where the Doctor and Jo go into the pub to they're trying to ask people where this Devil's End is, where the kind of cave system is that, everything's going down, where do they need to go, and everybody in the pub is just laughing because they don't, there's this report they're all watching on the TV, and I did quite like that aspect, that everybody's watching this news report about this thing going on. It built things up very well at the start, and I think it worked well. But yeah, the Doctor goes into the pub where they're all watching it, and he's asking, where do I find this pub? And they all think he's crazy, and they're all just being a bit silly and messing him around. And in the end, he gets was it in the pub where he starts getting pushed around a bit? And then I can't remember if that was that the pub? I think it was, wasn't it? Where he gets oh no, sorry, that's later on. That is in the dancing bit. We'll get to that in a moment. It's in the pub. He's just literally asking where to go, and nobody's listening to him, and he's getting rather annoyed. He's like, I just want you to tell me where this thing is. And they're all like, oh, well, this and that, and oh, it's not real, and oh, everybody's having a joke. It's like, no, just tell me where to go. I don't care. I just want to go there. And it's just the Doctor's way of speaking with people. It's still the case to this day. The Doctor's communication skills with humans is not amazing, and I just think it's really funny. Unit missed the broadcast because they were watching football. So yeah, there's this whole broadcast of what is going on in this cave, because they say at midnight something's going to happen, and Benton and Yates are there in Unit. I think the Brigadier's off on holiday or something, and yeah, they're going to be watching this broadcast, but they're watching the football, and they're like, oh, we'll skip over when it's time, 12 o'clock, to watch this broadcast, but they completely forget, and by the time they switch over, the thing has already happened, and the broadcast has ended abruptly, but they don't know what's happened because they were too busy watching the football. I just thought that was a funny little thing there. The Master is the leader of a black magic cult. Yeah, I mentioned that before. He's basically the leader of this cult that ends up summoning the Daemon, Alcazar. That's not Alcazar. That's something. I think that's something completely different. But it begins with an A. I should have really looked it up, but yeah, he summons this big demon. There's also gargoyles, which I think we'll get onto in a moment. So actually, that's the next point. The gargoyle looks so silly. I do think the gargoyles, although a cool concept, they don't look great. As far as I know, they're supposed to be like statues that move. Weeping angels, although not, they're completely different. They don't stop when you look at them or anything. They were statues, and now they can move normally, and they're gargoyles and they make silly noises, but they do look pretty terrible. They are just people in suits, obviously in costumes. That is to be expected, but yeah, they just look, I don't know, there's just something about them that I just don't love. And to be honest, they don't really do much. They don't really do anything, to be honest. They're kind of just there as like, oh, we've got a bit of a creepy monster. And I mean, the actual demon god guy doesn't rock up until I think the end of part 4. And we don't really see a lot of him, and he doesn't really do a whole lot either. The villains, other than the Master, don't really do a whole lot in this story, and even the Master, what he does is summon the demon god, the Daemon god, whatever. So all in all, there's not a whole lot that goes on with the villains, to be completely honest. But yeah, the gargoyles themselves, I know it's the 70s, but I just don't really like them. there's a sort of heat force field around the town. So I think they call it the heat barrier. So there's this barrier that after, the master does his ritual thing, this barrier goes all around the town, all around the church, and basically nothing can get in, nothing can get out of this heat barrier. They're all stuck in there, awaiting this Daemon to be summoned. And I thought that was a pretty cool concept, having this barrier. I mean, it was kind of built up for the fact of, well, now, Unit is stuck outside, or at least the Brigadier and his men are stuck outside. Benton and Yates are inside the barrier because they came through earlier on. But yeah, I do quite like it as a concept. What else we got here? The Doctor made the helicopter crash into the heat barrier. I thought that was pretty cool. There was a helicopter chasing after him. One of the guys, I suppose, hypnotized somewhat by the Master, trying to chase after the Doctor and Joe in Bessie, a good old Doctor Bessie, Third Doctor action sequence chase scene. Really, really like that. And yeah, he made the helicopter crash into the barrier, so that was pretty cool. The Master seems so desperate. So I can't remember why I wrote this down now. Why did I write this down? I can't remember. I can't really remember why I wrote this down. But yeah, the Master seems desperate. I mean, he kind of always is, isn't he? That is kind of the Master's thing. He's pretty desperate to just do anything. Was that when the God came out and he was like pleading, oh, please do this, because he really wants to, I don't know. I think his whole thing is that he wants the power, the power from the demon, whatever, to then rule the earth, to basically rule these humans because they're not very good, and I can make them better, and I'll rule them. And I think there's just this one moment where he's talking to the demon guy, and he just seems really desperate. And I don't think I've necessarily put it down as a bad thing, because it is just kind of the Master's shtick. He is constantly just desperate of doing better than the Doctor and doing the opposite to the Doctor, basically. So I guess that's just a point to make. The Doctor getting caught in a trap with the dancers, that's the bit I was talking about earlier. So they find these dancers, it's some parade thing that's going on that apparently they do in this town, and the Doctor gets caught in it, and he gets bumped around everywhere because it's actually a ploy by the Master and the people that are working with him to trap the Doctor. And I really like the moment where he's getting bumped around and the Doctor's just like, what is going on? I don't understand. He seems really uncomfortable and just flabbergasted, and I really like that moment. I just think it's really funny. The Doctor saying magic isn't real, it's all science. That was kind of a thing throughout the whole story. They're talking about magic, especially at the start. What's the thing they do at the start with Bessie? How, he makes Bessie come towards him, drive around where he wants her to drive without actually being in the car. And then, he speaks to her and she speaks back with the horn, and everyone's like, oh, that's magic. And he's like, no, it's not magic. It's remote control. I've got a remote control here. It's just science. And there's a lot of moments throughout the whole story. And the fact that this is a thing about black magic and stuff like that, and still he's like, magic's not real. Even right at the end, it's not real. It's all just science. And I think that's very, very Doctor-y. And then finally, my final point, the Master tried escaping in Bessie, but he controlled Bessie back to him. So the Doctor controlled Bessie back to him. So yeah, coming full circle with the whole Bessie remote control thing, I like how that did have an impact in the story. It wasn't just this thing of, oh, we're making Bessie remote control just for the fun of it, and for this, science and magic trick. It actually did come back in the end to... It came back and made sense to be there in the end. The Master just trying to get away, and he just ends up getting controlled right back to the Doctor and right back to Unit. And the Master is finally arrested because it's the end of the season, and then he gets locked away. I think it's on an island, isn't it? And then shows up again in the Sea Devils next season. But yeah, that is the Daemons. Like I said, I thought this was a decent story. 5 parts. Like a lot of classic Who and 70s Who, especially, with the 60s, it could have been shorter. I think as a 4-parter, it would have worked quite well, but it wasn't one of the most draggy stories. The fact that it was 5 parts and not a 6-parter that a lot of these stories seem to be, it worked better. It didn't drag a whole lot, so it was decent on that regard. I'm going to give the Daemons a 7 out of 10. It's kind of the average score that I give stories. Yeah, I think it was good. It's nothing spectacular. I think that the villains are a bit weak on the whole, in my opinion. The Master's kind of just there, and he gives out his plan, which is just to rule the humans, and it's a basic sort of master plan. And then, yeah, the gargoyles don't really do a whole lot. The main demon guy doesn't really do a whole lot. He kind of rocks up, has a bit of a whinge with the Master, have a bit of a back and forth, and then I do quite like how he ends up being like, I don't want the Master. No, the Master is not good enough to give my power to, but the Doctor, I'll give my power to you. And the Doctor's like, whoa, 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 I don't want that. I don't want your power. I quite like that, but ultimately, there's just not a whole lot going on here, but it's reasonable enough. It's a nice little finale to the season, so I think a 7 out of 10 is reasonable. But anyway, that's going to be it for this video, guys. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed, please go ahead, like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.